Hi, and welcome to another amazing chat with some advocacy partners that we have. So you are in session number 5, titled No Shortcuts, Do Your Due Diligence. I'm Kelsey Gilmore-Futerall. I'll be moderating this session for you, and I'm a legislative attorney here at Best Friends Animal Society. I'm going to ask my co-presenters to introduce themselves. So Kathleen, how about you kick us off too?
Sure. I'm Kathleen Murphy, and I'm a policy analyst here at Best Friends. And I'm based out of Nashville, Tennessee. And I think my dog might join us. He just has decided he might come. So we'll see if we have a second specialist here too.
And I'm the merrier.
Yes, I'm Elizabeth Orrick. I'm the National Manager of Puppy Mill Initiatives for Best Friends, as well as the California Policy Director. And I am based in Los Angeles.
Awesome. We're so excited to have both you ladies on here to help direct and guide this discussion so that we understand really how the success of an advocacy campaign can be determined by political timing and community dynamics. So let's just kick it right off with where you start when you've identified a community that needs a policy change. Where do you start?
Well, I always say you have to start with like some of the basics, and some of this is information that you already know, but you need to make sure you're filling in the gaps. So make sure that part of this too, though, is to make sure you're not in like an echo chamber or a bubble, to just make sure you're diversified in your information. So, but the basics is, what are your demographics in the community? Who's most impacted by the issue that you're going to be talking about? How does it impact them? Get really specific there, because it's that information that is going to help frame and kind of set your path. And it might not be the information you think it is, right? You might think that just a certain community is being impacted and then find out that it's a citywide problem, or vice versa. You think it's a citywide problem and it's only in, the western part of your city.
Yeah, and I would add, you've identified what the problem is, what the issue is that you're trying to solve for, but you also have to know what policies, what laws already exist in that community and what exists in surrounding communities. So if you're trying to enact a new policy, you want to make sure, first of all, that the state will allow that city or county to enact what you're trying to enact. And also, it may already exist and it's just not being enforced, or it may not exist for a reason. Maybe it was tried sometime in the past and didn't pass, and find out why, what happened, what could you do differently this time? And also, if you're trying to enact, a basic policy that has been done in multiple communities, use one of those communities in a city that's as close to yours as possible, as comparable as possible, if not in the very same state that you're working in, as a template. Because if you can make the job of the city or county easier by providing them with a sort of a plug and play ordinance or policy change, things are going to move much more quickly and much more smoothly. Nobody wants to reinvent the wheel. So anything that you can provide as a template is going to be a big help. And the way that you find those existing laws is through either the city or county's website, official website. They usually have their code of ordinances linked on that website, or you can go to municode.com, and that is a database of almost all city and county laws. And you can just look them up there. It may even be something that Best Friends has on our website. We list all of the breed restriction laws, all of the humane pet sales laws. So you should check our website as well.
And let me tack on to what just went over, what Elizabeth just went over is what's great about not reinventing the wheel is reaching out to the people that helped create that ordinance or that policy in another place and asking them how they did it. Because if you're able to find out, oh, well, this talking point, it really tripped us up, but this other talking point, oh, that sealed the deal, it sold it. That's how we got this done. That's part of, cheating on your homework, but for a good cause, right? Work smarter, not harder in that regard, and learn from other successes and pitfalls. And that will help you in the long run too.
So those are some really good tips to figure out what kind of policy we might suggest going forward. But if we have an idea, then, we're not going to reinvent the wheel, as we say. We're looking to our communities nearby to guide our policy language. How do we get to know the people that we need to convince now that we know which policy we want to suggest? Or how do we find out what motivates them?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I would recommend starting with your own representative if you can, because elected officials tend to be more responsive to their direct constituents. And if that person is not an option for whatever reason, then try and find out who's the most animal friendly person on that city council or county commission. I'm assuming that we're talking about animal ordinances. So find the person who is most animal friendly, and that's easy. Do a Google search, look at their official biography, go to their social media, see who may have a rescued dog, who may be a cat lover, start with them. And also I would recommend going on the website and watching past elected official meetings, whether they're city council meetings or county commission meetings. They usually have those archived on their website, and just watch how that governing body interacts. Who tends to be the softy, who tends to be, mention animals, see how they interact, see who seems to be the most approachable, and then start with that person. Because you can get a very good sense of what those elected officials' priorities are by watching how they govern, and see if you can tie in your goal with those priorities.
And that's the same if, what if you can't find someone who's animal friendly, overtly animal friendly? They don't have any pictures posted of their family and an animal or something like that. And like Elizabeth said, finding another issue that's similar. So similar issues to animals or the policy that you want to enact is going to be beneficial. So think about, is the person who's very environmentally friendly someone you want to approach to look at sponsoring your legislation? Find other things about them, or maybe you personally have a huge love of your greenways and parks. Reaching out to whoever is chairing the parks committee, that you could connect on that personal level and turn it into a relationship about animal policy. So don't feel discouraged if you have a city council of 5 members and nobody is holding up the sign that says, "I love animals," right? Like that's okay. You will still be able to find something to connect on them, and then through time, make that relationship work for what you're working on.
And I would also say, get to know them personally. All of those meetings are public meetings. Anyone can attend those meetings, even if they don't live in the community. Just go, let your face be visible to them. Introduce yourself. Their job is to represent their constituents. They work for you. So go to those meetings, go to the public events that they're going to go to, those community whatever they are, farmers markets or community events, library openings, whatever it is that elected officials tend to show up to. Just go there, make yourself present as a member of the community. And then it won't be, you won't be starting fresh when you reach out to them on this policy that you're asking for. You will have already kind of established a relationship with them.
That's a really good point, Elizabeth, because the types of events and where they hold themselves out to the public can also be a really good indicator of what they prioritize in their own both political and personal life. So it can also give us a lot of insight about that particular policymaker. That's a really good suggestion. So we know right now that that our network partners and shelters and rescues, we have needs that need to be met now. But when is the best time to pursue a policy change, or maybe to make that ask? Is there some time that's better than others? What do y'all suggest in terms of timing an ask?
It's a Pandora's box question. There's so many, there could be a lot of answers to that. So I'll take a stab at a few scenarios. So if you're, well, first of all, it's always great to build those relationships before you have to ask for something. Not always possible. So we'll set that aside. Is it a budget request? Do you need a large sum of money for this request to be implemented? Then you're most likely going to need to start in the fall. Most city and county governments start that budget process in the fall with budget hearings with the administration. And so really getting that teed up well in advance of when the budget process starts at the council, usually in May or June, more of this late spring, summertime. Getting that in early is better. Because if you miss that window, they're going to say our budget is set. We'll have to do it next year. But then also kind of staying away from certain times. If you know, calculate out when your legislation could be voted on. August is a time that a lot of people are very busy with school starting back or last minute vacations before school starts back. And so I always try to avoid August, just because it's a time that people just seem a little bit drained. That could also be true for when they're voting on the budget. Don't bring ordinances up or big issues up to be discussed when they have another huge topic on their plate to be focusing on. So those are just kind of some general guidelines. Elizabeth, what do you think? What do you usually suggest?
Yeah, so I think that's all really smart. Like if they are wrestling with a big issue at that time, that's not the time to try and add to their plate, right? So look for downtime. I would also say sometimes we can, for lack of a better word, capitalize on events in the news to move policy changes. So for example, in Los Angeles, we were able to get a puppy mill ordinance enacted because there had been a very big puppy mill bust in the news. And it was frankly embarrassing to elected officials that this was happening in their backyard. And they had publicly committed to, solving for that problem. So that was a great time for us to come in and take advantage of what was happening in the community to enact a policy change. In other cases, the timing is when you can be proactive. So we do a lot of humane pet sales ordinances that prevent retail outlets from selling puppies and kittens from puppy and kitten mills. And it's easier to enact those kinds of policies before there is a store in that community selling those animals, because if we can do it before the problem comes, then nobody is negatively impacted and it's a much more palatable thing to try and get done. So I would say if you can be proactive, that's always helpful. If you can use events in the community, events in the news to help push your agenda forward, that's really helpful. And then I would also say, look at the election cycle. Look at who on that city council or county council is up for reelection. Sometimes, people don't want to make waves when they're on the way out. Sometimes they want to just do everything they've wanted to do all along when they're on the way out. So look and see who's up for reelection, see, what's the community focused on at that time and what is that governing body focused on, and see if you can tie in what you're trying to do with those events.
I was going to say that too. Yeah, Elizabeth, is the election cycle is huge, because a council member who is termed out may be willing to go out more on a limb to kind of either have kind of that last hurrah or a legacy making piece of legislation, or really have that geared up for that fight. On the flip side, so though, they may be like, I'm done, like my time is up, I don't have the time to give this. And then also fellow council members may say, this is really controversial and you're going to make me vote on this when I'm on the ballot. So it's really important to talk to your advocate and sponsor that is on the elected body and feel them out. Ask them their thoughts on when is the best time to run legislation or to push a policy, because they're going to be in tune to some things that you're not, or the general public is not. They may know of a big economic development incentive package that's going to get pretty heated, and you don't want to get in the mess of that. So really relying on those relationships too can help give you that insight on timing.
So we talked a lot about timing and planning, both when it comes to assessing the community for the right time for the community, but as well as the right time for the particular elected body that you're presenting to. How long does it take to see legal, legislative, law, ordinance, however you want to call it? How long can that change take? Because I know a lot of our network partners are real antsy to have it done tomorrow or even yesterday. But can you maybe set some expectations for the duration that this can take?
No.
I think if we could make those predictions, we would be in Vegas, and probably not, also on beaches more often. I know I can speak for, like, here in Nashville, I'm on the city council. If you're doing a policy change, it does take 3 readings in Nashville for an ordinance, and they're 2 weeks apart. That's assuming you don't need to have stakeholder meetings, you don't get deferred by another council member, some lobbyist on the other side doesn't swoop in with a lot of misinformation. So those 6 weeks could get stretched out. But that's the fastest you would be able to pass something in a lot of municipalities. Is it takes 3 readings and they're typically 2 weeks apart. That's why it's important to do your homework on the front end and have those stakeholder meetings and plan all of this out and gather all your information before you file your legislation, so you can kind of what you will be up against potentially, but also you can hopefully plan for some pitfalls. Or if you think that there's going to be opposition, planning where if there's a break in council meetings for a holiday, that gives you more time to negotiate if you need to, without having to waste procedural time. So there's different ways to attack that, but if we could predict
Elizabeth,
it,
yeah, and that's kind of where my question was going, because Elizabeth, I know you've worked sometimes for a year or more in communities working on really difficult ordinances. So maybe do you have any words of wisdom to encourage network partners to keep going?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say the same thing. The more you can do on the front end to be prepared once it reaches the council, the faster things will go. But you really have to be patient and focus on how important what you're doing really is, and the effect it's going to have, the impact it's going to have in your community, and let that keep you moving forward, because these things can be very quick. Sometimes, again, the proactive work tends to move faster because they don't get bogged down by opposition. They don't get bogged down by some of the technicalities that a reactive ordinance might create. So I think that, you should be prepared for anything from a few weeks to a few years, honestly. And that's why we prioritize our work, right? We look at where we're going to have the most impact and focus our energies there. Some communities have rules that say that if it's a unanimous vote, they can pass something on first reading. So unlike Nashville, they can do things more quickly. But I think just really be patient. And, I would also say that be okay with things not getting through the first time. You may not get what you want. You may not get everything you want. You have to be willing to compromise. But just know that even if you don't get that ordinance passed the first time, just the fact that you've established these relationships and you've partnered with the community to try, that's an educational win, because you are planting a seed and you are helping educate not only elected officials, but members of the community, members of the public, that this is something important that they need to think about. And it'll make things so much easier the next time you want to engage with that community, the next time you want to engage with those elected officials. So don't look at any failure as a failure, look at it as a win, or at least a step forward toward positive impact in the community.
That's
and
fantastic.
something that we both said, it was being prepared to negotiate or have that time. That's part of your due diligence as well before you launch or file legislation or policy, go after policy, is know where your boundaries are, know where your deal breakers are for your advocacy group. What is a win? What is a loss? What is a trade-off that the community is willing to make and accept? Because at the end of the day, you don't want to bring something forward to only lose ground that you may have gained in the past. So really kind of knowing that in advance, it allows you to not be caught flat-footed. It allows you to move quicker into negotiations, and hopefully come out with a better piece of legislation. And we could go on about that all day. And we talk about it, I think, in another series about making sure that your legislation is drafted. Part of your due diligence is put some extra stuff in there if you know you're going to have to negotiate it out. But sorry, Kelsey, we'll save that for another time. That soapbox.
No, I really appreciate the direction that we've taken this conversation, because I think you ladies did a wonderful job of defining what due diligence is. It can be kind of a scary, big, amorphous term, and you've done a great job explaining just the information gathering and the community assessment that goes into bringing a policy forward, so that when somebody's completing their due diligence, they're finding out existing laws, where the gaps are in their current laws, and a little bit more about their community and their elected officials before they approach them with that policy ask. So we didn't define it right out the gate, and I think it's because that can be a little intimidating, but I think we've put it in a really nice, neat little package, and I appreciate your time speaking to our network partners today, and we hope that everybody enjoys this module and the future modules coming your way.
Thank you so much, Kelsey, and thank you to everybody who's out there doing the great work that they're doing to make this world a better place for people and pets.